Welcome to the Solid Verbal. The Solid Verbal.
Come after me! I'm a man! I'm 40!
I've heard so many players say, well, I want to be happy. You want to be happy for a day? Eat a steak. It's that woo-woo!
And now, Dan and Ty.
Welcome back to the Solid Verbal, boys and girls. Ty Hildenbrand here. Dan Rubenstein all the way over there. And beautiful and snowy.
It's disgusting.
Blustery.
It's disgusting here. It's gross.
In metropolitan New York City. Hello, sir.
It's the worst place in America right now.
So we're supposed to get snow on Thursday, which for many of you is when you're listening to this show.
Yeah, as opposed to the freezing rain I got to walk in last night.
Just beautiful weather right now.
Ugh,
but I think if the long-range forecast is to be believed, we should be turning the corner after this final round of snow and ice and whatever winter is coming for us.
I caught myself saying it's supposed to be nice this weekend because it's slated to be 43 and 45 and sunny, and I threw up in my mouth.
That's shorts weather, man.
For considering that now to be nice.
In this part of the country, after the winter we've had, that's shorts weather.
It's the worst.
You picked a move here, man.
I know. I make terrible decisions all the time, Ty. You should know this.
How are you otherwise, sir?
I'm all right. Life isn't bad. Going to Austin in a couple of weeks, obviously, to meet with you and everybody that comes out to the South by Southwest show that we're doing at the Four Seasons. That's the Friday night. That's the opening day, I believe, of South by.
Friday the 13th is when we're doing our show.
Bruce Feldman and Spencer Hall are going to be on stage with us.
A star-studded lineup to tell some college football stories.
I'm very excited. So your favorite college football personalities and me and Ty.
That's pretty much what it amounts to.
Yeah, so we're gonna be telling all sorts of fun stories. I am definitely baking cookies, G-rated cookies. These are I'm not bringing pot cookies or anything. We will be bringing treats. Hopefully we can give those out. I don't know what the rule is.
Are you really doing this?
Yeah, I'm absolutely doing this.
Oh, cool.
I'm absolutely bringing baked goods for everybody that comes out because I say this quite genuinely. I love the fact that people listen to and enjoy this show. So any way that I can give back, whether it's baked goods or shows, I will try. So if you are attending South by Southwest and you have one of those badges or you know somebody that's attending, you should come out to the show. It's going to be really fun.
Absolutely. Let us know if you're in and around the Austin area as well. We don't know what our plan's going to be beyond the South by Southwest show. We're very excited about that show, but we will be in Austin for the full duration of the weekend.
Yes.
Hanging out. So, let us know if you'll be in and around the greater Austin area. Solidverbal@gmail.com is still our email address. You can also find us on Facebook, on FanCred, and of course on the Twitter, Mr. Rubenstein.
Yo.
You posed some questions for our verballers out there. I should say you asked for some questions out on our Facebook page about me. Surprise, surprise.
Yeah.
We're going to get to those in just a little bit here. It's going to be a two-part show. So don't be alarmed if we don't get to those questions until part 2 drops at some point on Sunday early evening or later on after dinner. In the interim, though, we are going to talk to a longtime verballer, a very talented reporter and writer. Miss Lindsay Schnell from SI.com is going to join us. We're going to run through all things Pac-12, and Lindsay knows a thing or two about that. We're very excited to have her on the program this evening.
Absolutely. And we're getting to her in a second. What to you, when you look at the Pac-12, because we're discussing Pac-12 stuff, obviously, what is the defining stories of the offseason? North, south, people coming in, people leaving. Obviously, Mariota at Oregon is atop most people's lists, but USC as a national title contender seems to be an offseason story. Yeah. What to you is defining the West Coast in college football in March?
In March, to me, the story is a lot of what it was last year, and that is just the amount of coaching talent in that conference.
Yeah. And Steve Sarkisian.
I'm curious to hear what Lindsay has to offer. I want to ask her what she thinks of the whole direction of the conference and where it's headed. But I am really excited about the coaching talent in the Pac-12 and what that could mean longer term for the conference.
Yeah.
Specifically with regard to a team or a storyline surrounding a team. USC as a potential national championship contender,
Ooh,
even though we make the jokes about it, that to me is a really fascinating angle because they've always had the talent. They're going to have the talent again. They're going to have a Heisman Trophy caliber quarterback this coming season. I am interested to see if they sink or swim with those expectations now, because the expectations haven't been there in a while. Can Steve Sarkisian get himself over the hump?
They haven't been there in a while? They were there last year, the year before that.
Did anyone honestly believe, though, that they were a national title contender last year?
There were people that had them preseason very high. And after their big win against Fresno State,
right?
That big important win, people were very, very high on USC being back.
Let me say this then.
They finished 2013 in a very strong way with Coach O. They recruit well. It's year in and year out.
I believe
UCLA might have been bigger last year, but yeah, they were there.
I believe the hype in 2015 will be more credible than the hype we've seen in previous years. And perhaps that's why it interests me a lot. What is there a storyline for you? Is it Mariota leaving?
It's Mariota leaving, and that's the final real big chip, no pun intended, of Chip Kelly being gone. Obviously, taking in Marcus Mariota, as Mark Helfrich did coming in as coach, that's an advantage that every coach in the country would want to have coming in with a Heisman caliber quarterback ready for winning even more. Beyond that, I'm curious about a little bit of Mike Leach and what seems to be sort of the... I don't know. I wouldn't say treading water, but he seems to be in purgatory-ish where you can't have huge expectations, but he is a coaching talent that has won in the middle of nowhere before, albeit with more talent available.
More talent, but you're right. I think a lot of people expected him to go to Pullman and just cast this pixie dust.
Plug people into that system, into that air raid.
This pixie dust that he was going to bring to Pullman, which was going to resurrect the program, hasn't taken effect quite yet.
I'm exceedingly curious about Stanford and Cal. Stanford had their worst rushing season since this modern era of Stanford success under Jim Harbaugh and David Shaw, unable to really move the ball consistently on the ground like they were in years past. Kevin Hogan wasn't terrific week in and week out, although they finished strong, and their defense was excellent, and they finished by 8-5.
Yeah.
They still only go 8-5 with their most excellent defense, even though, losing Trent Murphy, Shane Scove, those guys that have been stalwarts of the program. So with Stanford moving forward, they're going to keep that same identity, but have they filled the trenches like they used to be able to? Because their defensive line is actually super thin right now. They've recruited pretty well, but the depth isn't there. And then just in the South, to me, it looks as wide open as ever. Whereas where Utah looks like with Travis Wilson back, that they can give anybody a scare and beat anyone in the South any given week with what they were able to do last year, beating UCLA and USC. USC, of course, coming out of sanctions and the depth that they have or have not built. They've recruited very well, but they're just so young everywhere. And lose a number of key pieces, not, you know, Leonard Williams, Hayes Pillard, all over that defense. And what, is UCLA more than hype? Are they more than blue and gold hype? Because the Arizona schools are the ones getting results in the South, and UCLA and USC are the ones winning signing day.
Arizona is doing quite well for itself on the college football circuit, and UCLA is another team. Perhaps it's a biased viewpoint, but Tom Bradley going to UCLA as that defensive coordinator, we got a few questions about it last week. I'm real curious to see how quickly he can produce results at UCLA, because they've needed an improvement on the defensive side for quite some time. Tom Bradley's an established name, though never west of Pennsylvania. Right. What happens now when he goes out there and is asked to just coach defense and maybe recruit somewhere in California? How quickly can he turn that around, if he turns it around at all? Yeah.
No, these are all big questions. And then the question of how the Pac-12 as a business continues to position itself. We make the jokes all season long, which are only sort of half jokes at this point, where there are a lot of entertaining, good games. And, the Pac-12 has embraced the Pac-12 After Dark thing. But Pac-12 After Dark doesn't necessarily mean Pac-12 with ratings.
Right.
And it is a shame that a lot of entertaining football goes unwatched or unseen outside of the West Coast, when a big reason for this big Pac-12 push with Larry Scott and their big TV deal and all their new bowl tie-ins the reasoning behind that is to become much closer to the SEC and the Big Ten in becoming national conferences, demanding national attention. And even with teams like Oregon, year in and year out, going to these big national bowl games, national championships, it seems that randomly in week 7, week 8, when there is like a crazy shootout, it's happening at 2:30 a.m. Eastern time, and you're staying a regional conference. So if they care about that, maybe they don't, or if they are going to take steps to adjust and better position themselves for better exposure.
We will be joined by Lindsay Schnell from SI.com momentarily to discuss those topics and much, much more as we get into the Facebook questions. But we should point out before we go any further that tonight's show brought to you by our good friends over at naturebox.com, Daniel.
Love the Nature Box. Just had some praline pumpkin seeds earlier today.
What is praline? What does that mean?
It's some sort of sweetness to them.
Yeah.
Pumpkin seeds are always nice. They're lighter. There's a little bit of a sweetness, a little bit of a saltiness, but it's not like eating, say, honey, the honey glazed nuts or honey cashews or something. It's a little bulkier. The seeds are nicer because they taste fresher and they're a little bit healthier.
What other snacks and bold flavors do you appreciate and enjoy from Nature Box?
Love the sriracha cashews as a salty option. The dried pineapple rings are excellent. Very fresh, even though they're dried. They just taste like fruit. It doesn't taste like something that's been sitting in a can or something created in a factory. I've done they have like these sesame sticks or these poppy sesame sticks that are really good. They're not like giant bread pretzel sticks. They're small. You just grab a palmful and you're on your way. Love those.
Very good. If you're interested, you can try Nature Box for free. You can get a trial box featuring 5 of their most popular snacks. Free snacks, you heard correctly. It is naturebox.com/verbal. naturebox.com/verbal, VERBAL.
Yeah.
You know you're going to snack. At least be smart about it with Nature Box. They've got over 100 nutritionist approved snacks. Something for everyone, truly something for everyone. No artificial flavoring, no artificial coloring or sweeteners, no trans fat, no high fructose corn syrup. One more time, if you're interested, give it a shot at naturebox.com/verbal, VERBAL.
Do it.
Daniel, joining us now, a longtime verbaler, first-time guest.
Oh, yeah.
On the Solid Verbal. Very pleased to welcome Lindsay Schnell from SI.com to the program. Ms. Schnell, how are you?
You guys, I'm so excited. Right now, just talking on your show, I have achieved a life goal of being on the Solid Verbal. So this is pretty much it for me. Now I can die tomorrow and I will have, done what I needed to do.
I won't pull out the Will Ferrell line about you living a trite and miserable life. I will kindly say that now you are on the Mount Rushmore of female Solid Verbal guests along with...
We're post-gender on this show.
Post-gender?
We're post-gender.
Wait, I want to know who else is on the mountain.
Holly Anderson, Nicole Auerbach. Is there anyone I'm missing, Dan?
I mean, I don't know if the testing is in with Andy Staples.
Okay.
But no, there have certainly been a great list of luminaries. Yes. Oh, Andy Wall, by the way.
Andy Wall, that's right. And Dr. Jane.
Life advice. Dr. Jane. Yeah, I'm saying it right now. This is going to be our most diverse guest off-season ever, and perhaps season.
It's a long off-season, Dan.
Yes.
And Mama H, right?
Mama H. Fiance Kate.
Mama
Rubenstein. This Mount Rushmore has like 10 spots on it.
Yeah, it's a Rushmore Valley.
Okay. Well, we brought you on to talk a little Pac-12.
Yeah.
Let's start in the North. Actually, let's start overall in the Pac-12 because Larry Scott's been doing his best over the last couple of years to, sort of play a PR professional and make the Pac-12 into this exciting thing that people can get behind. What is the state of the Pac-12 conference as a whole? Is it getting better, getting worse, getting tougher because of the coaching situation? As you look from afar, how do you view the Pac-12 conference?
I think it's definitely getting tougher top to bottom. They've brought in so many high-quality coaches. I question the star power now that Marcus Mariota has left for the NFL, I think that he was someone that everyone could root for across the country. Even Oregon State fans, would admit grudgingly that they liked him. But I think they still, they play so many games at night. They play so many games. Pac-12 after dark is a wonderful thing, but I question how many people on the East Coast are even watching it. So I think that it's growing. I think it's much more popular than it used to be. The Pac-12 networks has helped. I think that they, have an early title contender, national title contender in USC. But I'm interested to see where it goes from here, because last year it was supposed to be awesome. And then again, no one for the Pac-12 won a national championship.
Well, I must say, if there are two things that get my co-host going, it's A, USC national title, quote unquote contender.
Yes.
And B, the Pac-12 night game thing. Right. What is the solution, Dan? Lindsay, what do you do if you're Larry Scott? How do you get this conference more in the national conversation, the national ecosystem for those of us who are here on the East Coast?
Well, I think that the Pac-12 conference and the office needs to embrace the Pac-12 after dark thing. You don't hear about it from them. You don't hear about it from press releases, or Larry Scott doesn't ever say it. You hear about it from other writers, right, and fans. So I think if they embraced it, they made it a nationwide thing, that would help. And I think it's going to, just as you continue to have teams that do well, they will just naturally grow. I mean, 3 or 4 years ago, no one cared about the Pac-12, right. And now at least it has some prominence nationally.
I agree with Lindsay, and it was a shame because a lot of that Pac-12 After Dark was, and I've said this a few times, it was probably the best TV show of the fall in terms of pure entertainment value. The Hail Marys at USC and at Arizona, all of the crazy stat game where, Connor Halliday put up 700 and whatever yards up at Wazoo against Cal. All of those games were great and entertaining. I don't know if it's more of a flex schedule thing, like, it's clearly looking like, say, USC and Oregon are going to be in the top 10. Maybe they shouldn't be playing at 10 p.m. Eastern. That kind of thing, maybe a little bit more flexibility in terms of that, but I don't know what's written into the TV contract. So that seems like, I agree with Lindsay, the embracing of the Pac-12 after dark and maybe staggering that Thursday, Friday, Saturday, whatever the case may be with the TV networks.
That's a great point, Dan. I have to say that the rescheduling of TV games, I see that a lot in basketball especially, that some really good games from teams that no one anticipated are not in a primetime slot. And so I've also wondered if there are shackles on all those TV contracts, but if they could loosen that up so they had freedom to move things. I know that's not ideal for teams and coaches, but I think it would help fans a lot.
Absolutely, yeah. And it looks like even just very early on, we're in March now, looking forward to this season, and we'll start with USC because that's what we brought up initially. There looks to be a ton of offensive skill talent all over the conference, and especially when you zero in on USC, they certainly lose a couple of receivers that could have contributed big things this year, obviously a running back, but their offensive line looks pretty good. They've built up the secondary talent nicely. What to you is... What does USC have to improve upon from last season and the sort of close losses or disappointing results? And what to you concerns you about what they have now?
Well, I would say that, first of all, defensively, who's going to replace Leonard Williams? He might not have gotten the attention this last year that he did the year before, but it's because he's getting double teamed all the time now. And, he commanded attention from other teams, and that helped USC. So they've got to find someone to fill in for him. How can Cody Kessler continue to get better? I think that he has done a lot. He's improved a lot, but he can still do so much more. And then, and I know you'll agree with this part, Dan, I'm not sold on Sark. Like, I had a really long conversation about this once with Yogi Ross, who is close with Sark, close with Pete Carroll, and he told me that the reason he thinks Sark is good is that if you watch the play calling, everything that he does is meant to attack some part of the defense that they see as a weakness. And after that talk, I got on board with Yogi, and I picked USC to beat UCLA in the battle for LA, and then I was totally wrong. It was ridiculous. He's such a good recruiter. And I mean, I've had a lot of talks with other coaches around the conference who are like, oh yeah, I feel really bad for them with sanctions. Now they only have 3 5 stars instead of 4. So they certainly have the talent. Can that coaching staff put it together?
Right. And looking across the city, it becomes much more difficult. And that was one of the things that Pete Carroll took advantage of, is he had a down Pac-10 at the time. He had a down UCLA to deal with, whether it was Carl Durrell or whoever, or Neuheisel at the end. UCLA themselves have put together very nice recruiting classes, have established themselves recently as the power in LA. They have the big replacement of Brett Hundley. They've got a couple of huge pieces on defense, especially along the line, to replace. Are you confident in the UCLA coaching staff with what you saw last year with a good mix of youth and experience, looking forward to this season with a good amount of experience, but it looks like a lot of youth in a lot of different places, that UCLA is built to succeed even with the turnover?
No, not from a coaching staff perspective. I question, there's a difference between being a good recruiter and a good developer of talent. You know, I covered Oregon State for a long time, and that's something that Riley and his staff hung their hat on, being good developers of talent. And I don't think you can look at UCLA and see a lot of individual growth. A lot of the criticisms that people have had of particular players early in their career are the same later in their career. And, Dan, I remember a tweet that you wrote during one of UCLA's meltdowns, and you said, but this is what you get with a staff full of recruiting experts. Yep. And I think that that's very, very true. But will they finally put it together? I don't know. I also had some talks last year with people in the LA media market about UCLA really pushed Hundley as a Heisman candidate, and they were all about attention for him, and they're great to work with. Their SIDs are awesome. They give you access. You can talk to players, talk to coaches. But now that they underachieved, do they pull that back? Was that over the top at all on their end? I'm sure that Mora is evaluating that situation. And does that change things if their focus is more on the field? As a media member, I don't necessarily like if that's how it goes, but I've heard from some people that they think Mora is going to start reining it in big time.
Let's move to the north and talk about the Oregon Ducks. There are only so many things we can ask about this past season because so much went right. We're not going to try and criticize any one bit of what Mark Helfrich has been able to do, but I remember when he first took office in Eugene, my co-host Dan Rubenstein a little bit skittish about buying in on Mark Helfrich.
I'm perennially skittish, Ty. You should know that by now.
Why not?
I thought his concern was more about Scott Frost as an offensive coordinator than Helfrich running the show.
Scott Frost, yeah, there was, I think, enough skepticism to go around, whether it was on offense, defense, special teams, or at the head coaching position. Is it now safe to buy in on Mark Helfrich long-term as that stable replacement for Chip Kelly?
Well, I think we're going to know at the end of this season. It's got to be really easy to be a coach when the best player in the country is on your roster. When Mike Riley left Oregon State and took the Nebraska job, I was on the phone with Nebraska radio, and they wanted to know if Scott Frost would come be his offensive coordinator or associate head coach. And I was just silent because I thought they were kidding, because it didn't make sense to me. I don't know what we haven't seen them achieve with a roster full of their guys. And once again, without Marcus, play calling must be really simple. He can just save a lot of things. I think that Helfrich I think he's a long-term person there. I don't know that he will lead them to a title. I think that the window closed, but we'll see what happens with the quarterback position. That's what's going to be most interesting there. So I could get on board with, buying into Helfrich long-term. If I were a Duck fan, I think I would like what they've been able to do. Ohio State was so good. I don't think that you pin that on Helfrich or bad coaching calls or anything. And they've continued to bring in a lot of talent. But you got to wait and see what life is like without the Heisman winner.
And that's the next question then. How long does it take Oregon to reload and get to a point where perhaps they're battling for another playoff spot, for another spot in a national championship game?
Well, I just don't know what's going to happen with the quarterback thing. With Vernon Adams transferring there from Eastern Washington, I like Vernon. I want to root for him. I want him to be successful. I think he has an awesome story. He's a great nickname, as Dan and I have talked about on Twitter a lot. Flying V, all right there, all the materials there. But man, only fall camp. That's not very long to learn an entire playbook. If he can step in, I think that he does understand he doesn't have to come in and save the day like he did at Eastern a lot. There are so many playmakers around him. I would say that they're, and then they bring back a lot offensively around them. They're going to have to replace some important people on the line. That will be huge. But the continuity that they've had within their coaching staff has been great. And I think the new pieces they've added since Helfrich took over have been really good. I like Matt Lubick, their receivers coach, a lot. I think that he's done a lot with not a ton of talent. He's figured out a way to help these guys develop. So, but if they have, what's a down year at Oregon? Like 9 wins? If they have 9 wins, I don't think that it's that crazy. They open at Michigan State, right? Or early. It might not be their first game.
First week is Eastern Washington, then Michigan State, yeah.
Oh, that's right. Of course, Eastern, Vernon's old team. Mm-hmm. That could be a really telling game at Michigan State. They won it last year because of Marcus, and they're not going to have him. So I don't know. I think the Ducks might come back down to earth for a few years. All right.
Well, about an hour north is the arch rival. Not even.
No.
40 minutes.
How fast are you guys driving?
That's about 70 miles an hour. You can get there. It's not that far off of I-5.
I'm using Google Maps here.
75 miles on I-5 and 65 to 67 miles on Highway 99, which is the scenic route.
Google Maps is telling me 51 minutes from Eugene to Corvallis. And I got to be honest, Lindsay, I know you know a lot about the Oregon State program. If you read published reports and listen to what some people have said this offseason with some of the coaching turnover there and how hard it might be to win at Oregon State, you just assume that Corvallis is hell. It is a difficult place to attract talent to. It's a difficult place to win at. What is the expectation there, and how bad is it if you are the head football coach at Oregon State?
Well, first of all, I went to school at Oregon State. I loved Corvallis, personally. I think it's underrated as a food town. It's beautiful. It's an educated community. It's pretty expensive to live in. It's actually the second most expensive city in the state of Oregon. But I am not an 18-year-old football player who wants my family to be able to see me. You can't fly commercially into Corvallis Airport. That's a huge problem. You have to fly into Eugene or to Portland and rent a car. And also, there's no diversity there. That's a big issue. Now, I think that they brought someone in, Gary Anderson, who's going to sell the positives. It's such a family environment. Players' parents, recruits' parents love that. And he was a terrific hire. I tip my hat to the Oregon State administration, way better than I thought. But that doesn't mean it's suddenly easy to recruit in Corvallis. And it's such a small recruitable population in the Northwest. You got to go to California. Okay, well, kids that are in the LA area can drive to UCLA and USC for unofficial visits. You have to be intentional to get to Oregon State. And then if you're also being recruited to Oregon, Oregon also has, Eugene, small community, not a ton of diversity. Way cooler facilities and toys, though, and that matters when you're 18. So expectations for Oregon State, I don't know. I think there are some people who think Gary Anderson's going to come in and lead them to 8 wins right off the bat. But they have to replace a quarterback. They are looking to, their running back has to get better. They have questions at receiver. They lose a ton of people defensively, although, quite frankly, that defense wasn't very good. But you're installing a new system. And they have a tough-ish schedule, like non-conference. I don't think that they have, they can't just walk through their non-conference schedule and win. So if you could be bowl eligible this year in Corvallis, I think that's a huge achievement.
We opened the Pac-12 South conversation talking about USC and UCLA because those are the two most notable programs nationally in the Pac-12 South. But if we're talking about what have you done for me lately, modern success and modern powers of the Pac-12 South, we're talking about the Arizona schools. And Todd Graham and Rich Rod come in both in 2012. And they've essentially, after some transition, they've won the past 2 division crowns in the South. What have those 2 guys specifically done with changing quarterbacks, with injuries, with attrition, with coaches leaving? What have both of them done uniquely in their own way to build and sustain success even with the hurdles that they face?
Well, first of all, Todd Graham has just stayed put, which is a huge achievement for him. I think that they have both made it cool to play at Arizona and Arizona State again. Rich Rod, people love that offense. You know, when they beat Oregon last year and people were falling all over themselves, they couldn't believe it. Rich Rod said, well, I invented this. I know how to run it better than anyone. We are not uncomfortable playing at the pace that Oregon is. And ASU has done it with defense. You know, I've been really impressed there. I think that both those schools are, especially Arizona State, which is in the Phoenix, Scottsdale area, and with Tempe, they're just waiting to be a good school. I mean, who wouldn't want to go play football there? The sun shines year-round. There are lots of pretty girls in Arizona. And now you have other programs that have had success at ASU. And then at Arizona, they are building off all the success they've had in basketball. And I know that Arizona, they've done some facelifts. I think that their stadium renovation is complete. I wasn't there this year, but they've made it a priority, and the fan base buys into that, and then recruits buy into that. I think what Rich Rod did this year with Anu Solomon was pretty remarkable. I'm excited to see what he does in his future, especially with his connection to Marcus Mariota and all the conversations that we had about him being like Marcus. I think that they've just made it cool to play there, and they both seem invested. A big problem in the Pac-12 for a long time is, with the exception of USC and maybe now Oregon and still Washington because they have a lot of cachet even though they've struggled, Pac-12 jobs were a stepping stone to something better for a lot of coaches, and everyone knew that. But I don't think that that's how Rich Rod and Todd Graham have looked at it. They said, I want to stay here. I want to build this. And that instantly makes people excited.
Which team are you buying more of stock-wise for 2015? Obviously, Arizona loses a good amount on defense and along their offensive line, but Anu Solomon was promising, and they've got a very good receiving core coming back. Arizona State loses a couple big offensive linemen. Obviously, Jalen Strong, who meant so much to them these past couple seasons after transferring in. Who do you think is built better for this fall specifically?
In colleges, with football or basketball, I'm always buying into coaches more than I am to players or rosters because I think coaches do develop talent. And I'm a big believer in Rich Rodriguez, so I would say Arizona. I just think what he's been able to do, he's instilled so much confidence in that group, and he walks that fine line of having swagger, but we're going to work really hard and figure out how to do this. When they beat Oregon the first time, they totally expected it, and they just beat them because they were better that night. They got crushed, of course, in the rematch.
Right.
And I think that's because Oregon had a lot more talent. But I am interested to see what he does with this group. And I think that he plays the role well of kind of being forgotten. When they rolled into Eugene this year, everyone thought it was going to be a blowout. And it definitely wasn't.
Not like the Pac-12 championship, anyway.
Which I just want you guys to know that one of the most humorous things I have ever witnessed was after the Pac-12 championship, we're downstairs, we're outside Oregon's locker room, waiting for the locker room to open, and they have taken Helfrich and Marcus and a defensive player off on a golf cart to press conferences on the other side of the stadium, and it's huge, right? So it took them forever. And then Rich Rod drives by on a golf cart, and as he gets closer to us, sinks further and further and further down in his chair and covers his face. It was hilarious. He was clearly weary that someone was going to ask him a question or even say hi to him.
Oh, poor Rich Rod. Elsewhere in the Pac-12 South, obviously Colorado and Utah. Colorado, I'm more intrigued by. Utah, we've seen Kyle Whittingham succeed. We know he is a good coach. He had to deal with some bad breaks these past couple of years.
Does his AD know he's a good coach?
I hope so by now. I hope the AD knows that he has talented assistant coaches who should be paid a fair wage. That would be really nice. But before that, Colorado, they did the thing that you like to see from teams that are going to lose a lot of games, and that is consistently fight. That is give much better teams a scare week in and week out. They even going to, or they hosted Utah late. They lose that game by 4 points. They take UCLA to double overtime, heartbreaking double overtime loss to Cal. If Colorado's front seven, that seemed to be the big thing with stopping the run, if they are able to take a major step forward, what kind of step could you see Colorado taking this fall?
I think they got to win some of those close games. They have to blow out some people in their non-conference schedule. Let's pull that up. And I kept thinking they were going to get someone this year that they shouldn't have got. And all those teams pulled through. But I think that this coming fall, if they can knock off, they're not going to knock off Oregon, but, they had UCLA on the ropes. That would be a huge win for them. So I think that'll be the big thing. You just need one or two of those. No one's expecting them to come in and win 7 games right off the bat.
Right, true. And Utah actually returns a fair amount. They lose a couple of headliners, but really the core of the team looks to be intact. To what degree do you think Utah outcoached, outschemed, outprepared teams, and to what degree do you think they have legitimately very, very good players that will threaten anybody in the conference in any given week?
I think that they have really physical players, and that's really hard to simulate in practice if you're not an extremely physical team. So if they can beat you up a little bit early in the game, it scares you a little bit, puts you back on your heels. I think Whittingham is a very good coach. He's a perfect example of someone who's had to develop a lot of talent, because especially when Utah was in the Mountain West, they're not getting 4 and 5 stars. Right. But now they have so many new staff members. There's so much turnover. And if I'm a player, I'm probably on Twitter, and I'm reading all this stuff about how our athletic director doesn't believe in our coach and won't give him an extension, and we wouldn't go after our assistants and offer them fair wages. And that makes me nervous and might distract me. So I think can they shut out all the distractions and focus and get better this spring, so that when they get into fall camp, that's, months behind them and put away. But I think they just out-physical teams mostly. They just beat you up, and they play really hard the entire game. What Colorado's trying to mimic that, right? They might not be as physical, but they're just trying to play so hard that by the end, maybe if you let up a little bit, they have an opportunity to beat you.
Let's go back to the north and talk about Stanford, a team that I think surprised both Dan and I with their 8-5 record over the past season. They kicked off spring practice recently, and David Shaw is quoted as saying that he loves it. He loves the hunger he sees from his team, this newfound, purpose to try and prove that they belong among the nation's elite, among the conference elite. In your estimation, where is that program headed? Because after David Shaw took over for Jim Harbaugh, we had similar questions to the ones that we have now about Mark Helfrich. Is he a long-term solution? Is he going to be able to sustain that kind of success moving forward? This year was the first time maybe we saw a little bit of a bump in the road. So I wonder, was that an aberration, or is that a sign of things to come?
I think Stanford is fascinating. I was just talking about this today with someone. Part of this is being in a pro sports town. They're just not going to get a lot of attention. But when I was freelancing for Grantland and I went there and did my piece on Tyler Gaffney, David Shaw and I had to talk about how they were really good. They were going to the Rose Bowl. And their student body just isn't really into it. And he said, well, at Stanford, everyone's doing something remarkable. So the fact that we have a good football team isn't that different from what else is going on around campus. What's interesting is that for as bad as they were offensively, I think that was the best defense that they've had in the last few years, since they got back on the national scene. They just so inept offensively, they could not figure it out. I think that he is a good long-term solution. I think that it's easy for people to forget that Stanford has a much smaller group of kids that they can recruit because of academic standards. Not only that they have to hit so many different bars in high school when they're just to qualify for Stanford, but then you still have this rigorous academic scheduling while you're being a football player. That's a lot for a lot of people to take. And someone has to lose, right? In a conference, you're going to have people at the top with just a few losses, and then you're going to have people at the bottom with just a few wins. But I think that Stanford is around for the long haul. I really like David Shaw. I think he has a really good plan, a really good idea of what it's going to take moving forward. And I think that we're far enough removed from the Jim Harbaugh era that this is his team, his program. But they got to replace on defense. They got to figure out what the heck was wrong offensively and how can they fix it when they have a lot of similar pieces still. And they seemed to like when they were sort of the underdog, when Oregon was getting all the attention. And I think that they know that after the year they had, they will, because it's considered, a downfall after the success that they had for the few years before, that they're going to be hungry to fix it. And I can see Shaw, I can totally see him saying that. And I think he has a really high standard for excellence. So he wouldn't say that if he didn't really see a difference.
David Shaw's in his early 40s, and his name comes up whenever you talk about NFL jobs. Is he a guy you think will eventually end up in the NFL?
I don't see it, but that's partially because I view the NFL as this dog-eat-dog world, ruthless, not a lot of really good human beings. And
seems accurate.
And here's David Shaw at practice with his wife and his beautiful family, and he loves being a dad. He loves the other pieces. A lot of coaches go to the NFL, I think, to escape all the other pieces, the fundraising, the talking to boosters, being friends with some of the fans, going to all these events on campus. But Shaw likes it because it's just different at Stanford. It's expected, and he believes in being well-rounded as much as anyone. I mean, he has staunchly said that he doesn't think athletes should be paid. And what's his line about instead of paying these guys, instead of giving them a paycheck, let's teach them how to go earn their own paycheck,
right.
Something like that. So I see him as a long-term person there. And I don't think it's a secret that Harbaugh, a lot of people weren't fans of the way he treated others, and they know with Shaw how good they have it.
Right.
Let's talk about Cal. By my count, the Golden Bears gave up more than 30 points on 10 separate occasions.
Wow.
In 2014. Defense is clearly a need, Lindsay, as we progress forward into 2015. Are there signs, are there tea leaves that we can read that would point to some progress forward on the defensive side?
I didn't see a lot, personally, in the spirit of honesty. No, I was underwhelmed by them. I didn't see big steps forward. I didn't see a defense that looked like they were taking it personally when they were getting scored on so much. No, that's a program that I think is they're kind of stuck. They built this big, new, beautiful stadium. Their athletic director gets forced out. Some people don't agree with the hiring of Dykes. They seem stuck to me.
Jeff Tedford's having a good laugh at this.
You're right. I mean, what do you think, Dan? You pay attention to the Pac-12 a lot.
Cal is in an interesting position. They should be able to recruit better than they do, and they did with Tosh Lupoy. And then their defense was actually very nice under Clancy Pendergast. So it is a little bit weird that they haven't been able to build the depth. They had 2 years ago just a crazy year of and rash of injuries and bad luck. It is going to take, especially because that offense can be very, very good. They can score on just about anyone. We saw them against USC. We saw them against Oregon, at least early on. And to succeed when you play with that kind of pace, it seems that the blueprint is you're going to need 2 or 3 years of very deep defensive recruiting to at least to find the nuggets of depth, to find, surprise stars. And Cal, it seems like they're still in the middle of that. But to attract, and they have similar, if not exactly the same, recruiting standards and issues that Stanford has in recruiting guys that have at least a certain GPA and meet a certain bar. But in the Bay Area, in Cal, in Oakland, in Southern California, Berkeley, it's a household name. People know that you're going to get a good education. You can live in a big city and go to an interesting place, meet interesting people. I'm surprised that Sonny Dykes and Cal haven't done a better job with as many opportunities as they're probably, or as they look like from the outside looking in, that they have not found more and convinced more people to go to Cal instead of, say, UCLA or Arizona State, stuff like that. I'm surprised that they haven't been able to find more of that on the recruiting trail.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I think that's a great point, too, about defensively, their recruiting classes have to be deep, talented, and they have had a rash of injuries. And, we saw even with Oregon, a team loaded with talent, you have enough injuries that catches up to you. When you have a team that doesn't have very much talent, geez, now you're in trouble. But, yeah, they just... I'd be fascinated to hear their pitch because something isn't clicking with a lot of recruits.
All right. Speaking of defense, my favorite offseason headline thus far has been from the AP, quote, Washington State hires Grinch as defensive coordinator. Am I the only one who finds that funny?
That's terrific.
The Grinch. All right. So they gave up more than 30 on 8 separate occasions this past year. The question, I think, remains pretty much the same as at Cal. When is this defense going to take a step forward? And more broadly speaking, Mike Leach is a guy who's been in the limelight, in the public eye in terms of college football for quite some time. Is he turning that situation around in Pullman? Because when they brought him in, we all kind of thought maybe it'd be like Lubbock North. Thus far, it hasn't quite worked out, just 3-9 this past season.
Well, first of all, I'm more concerned about is the special teams coordinator going to keep his job all season? you know, who else is going to get fired if they have a bad game? When Leach took that job, I've been to Pullman, I've been to Lubbock, but I don't think you can compare them because even though they're both outposts, Texas is full of talent, and convincing the third or fourth best running back in the state of Texas to stay in state and go to Texas Tech is very different than convincing the third or fourth best running back in the Northwest to go to Washington State. I'm curious to see if he's a long-term solution there. Does he like it? With Mike Leach, you just never know if you're getting a straight answer about the question you asked or some other topic that he brought up. So I'm not sure he wants to stay there. They've invested in the program a lot. They've done some renovations. They're building that, or maybe it's done their beautiful new football ops building. But I think he passes the buck a lot on people. I mean, he's obviously an offensive guru, and he's so good at developing quarterbacks. I mean, we saw that when Halliday got hurt, and I'm blanking on the kid's name that came down and they beat Oregon State with, that kid barely played and he had 1 week to prepare. But defensively, they struggle, and my read on it from afar is Leach doesn't seem to want to completely turn it over to someone and then deal with the ups and downs that come with that. He expects success quicker. So I don't know. I'm not convinced that they're going to figure it out or that he wants to stay there and figure it out.
The bigger team in the state of Washington, of course, is the Washington Huskies.
Never heard of them.
They made one of the biggest offseason acquisitions in finally luring Chris Peterson away from Boise State and bringing him on campus. Grade out year one for us, Lindsay. It seems as if Washington won the games they were supposed to and lost the games they were supposed to. Where are we at now with Chris Peterson? Do you expect another step forward in 2015?
Okay, if we're giving a grade, I would, I instantly want to compare him to everyone else in the Pac-12. If you compare him to everyone else in the Pac-12, they're probably about a C. If you just look at what they did, he's probably looking at about a B. I mean, that defense was awesome. They had so many big-time players, and that's going to be their question in spring. Can they replace Shaq Thompson and everyone else that was really good for them that's now in the NFL? What's interesting about Pete when he took that job is at Boise State, he didn't have to deal with ego. He recruited kids that were overlooked, had a chip on their shoulder, and he brought them in and said, we'll prove to everyone that you could have played in the Pac-12. Now he's dealing with 4- and 5-star guys who need a lot of babysitting, and you got to deal with all these annoying parents who, well, USC's offering him this, Oregon's offering this, what are you going to offer him? And I don't think that Pete has the tolerance for that. So I'm really curious to see, can he manage all the other factors? Obviously, he's a very good X's and O's coach. He's a terrific defensive coach. They have a good system. They had it at Boise State, installing it now at Washington. But all the peripheral stuff, I don't think that he's a fan of it, and you have to deal with it there. And I remember one time a reporter told me that when Sark was still there, Sark suddenly realized, okay, I have to work with the media, I have to work with the community, or no one's paying attention to us, because we got the Seahawks, we got the Mariners, people have other things to do. And I just don't know if Pete has hit that yet, or if he will. I think that Washington is a powerhouse waiting to happen. I know Dan doesn't want to hear that, but they have all the pieces there. And I think I'd be interested to conduct some sort of survey to find out who has more cachet as a national brand now in 2015. Is it Washington or is it Oregon? Because I think it's still Washington. Even though they've struggled, I think that they're a big deal across the country, and they can promote so much about their university in Seattle. So, I don't know. And what is Tyler Miles? That's their quarterback's name, right? What's he going to be able to do this year? I expected more from him in 2014 than he showed. The offense kind of got lost in 2014, but they were able to mask that because they had such a good defense that's what people mostly talked about. But it's time for him to take a big step this year.
I respectively do not believe Washington is actually anywhere near the stratosphere of Oregon at the moment in terms of national brand and cachet.
Well, okay, wait, I have to ask another question. What age group are we surveying here? Because I think that's part of the conversation.
True. I think at this point, with how Oregon's been able to recruit and at the national stage with which Oregon plays their games, the big opinions, the guys that go, and this will be a very good draft for Washington with Danny Shelton and Shaq Thompson most likely going in the first round. But in terms of awareness of players and Marcus Mariota winning the Heisman, let's see, it's 2015. Washington went 0-12, 2007?
Yeah.
So they go 0-12 in 2007. They last beat Oregon 10, 11 years ago now. They're not even are they a top 5 team even in their own conference in terms of national cachet at this point? I really don't know with Stanford, Oregon, UCLA, USC, and maybe now Rich Rod in Arizona. It's hard to, I think
maybe
Chris
it's just my Northwest bias, but man, I think that still people know about Washington, and maybe it's that they know they're bad. I mean, it could be a mark against them.
True. No, and I think Washington should recruit well, and Washington's certainly a better state to recruit in than Oregon is because of the Seattle area and because of the success that Washington used to have under Don James, Rick Neuheisel, whatever. But college football is like far to what have you done for me lately. I think at this point in Washington, I don't know how well they recruit nationally. I don't know. It seems like until they can string together 9-10 win seasons and not 7 win seasons. It's tough for me to imagine, but they're certainly, if you're going to collect a grouping of sleeping giant programs in college football, I think they're in that.
I mean, they're probably in the discussion there, but it's been about 15 years since they won anything of real significance. And I'm talking about the 2000 Rose Bowl when Rick Neuheisel was still coaching. They went
Who'd he beat?
Purdue, right? They beat Purdue in that game. It's been a long time since Washington's done anything of real significance. And you're right. College football is all about what have you done for me lately? Oregon's been there. They're flashy about it. They run the innovative finesse offense.
How dare you?
The innovator of that system is now coaching a team in the NFL and making waves. So I think there's a lot of reason to get behind Oregon beyond the flashiness. It's simply been a better program over the last decade and a half.
I like to look at like because in the end of the day, which is the terrible cliche, but what it comes down to is who have recruits seen succeed. And it's very difficult if you didn't grow up like a legacy Washington fan or a legacy whoever fan, whatever the conference. It's very difficult to say, you know, from the time this kid was 10 years old to 16 years old, they've done nothing of note. I mean, the best thing Washington is they've won a couple of really big Thursday night games. I think they beat, you know, Stanford 17-13 or whatever they did a few years ago on a Thursday night. They had the really fun game against Baylor in, I believe, the Alamo Bowl. But in terms of like week in and week out impressing regional, local, coastal, national audiences, whatever, it's been a while.
You could also throw in the whole brand argument, which shouldn't be overlooked. You could sit in a room with plenty of college football beginners, college football 101ers who don't know a thing about it. They look on the field, they see Oregon's uniforms. All of a sudden, they want to root for that team because they look cool. I think that resonates across all age groups, not just 18-year-old kids. All right, Dan, so much for the football. With our good friend Lindsay Schnell from SI.com, we've got a whole other quadrant to discuss. Part 2 of this program will drop at some point. Is it a quadrant
or is it a half?
I'm going to go quadrant because it sounds more scientific. But technically speaking, you are correct.
Yeah. I've listened to part 2.
As have I.
I've also on it. Ty, I think you're going to love it.
You have this innate ability to make me uncomfortable.
I think you're going to love it.
And, you know, even though it may get a little testy in part 2.
We should do a tease because we know what's going to happen in part 2.
In part 2, ...
Okay, here are some of the things that we're going to discuss in part 2. Changing tires.
Yep.
Handiness.
Yep.
What Ty thinks his sexiest muscle is. A story about Dan and a romantic entanglement from years and years ago that was particularly embarrassing and awkward.
Child rearing.
Okay, that's weird. Child rearing, where Dan sees himself in 10 years. Ty's wedding. Pictures of Ty's wedding and where they might end up.
Are only children creepier than SEC fans?
Only children. SEC I don't think we discussed that. SEC
Maybe
fans. Not. What else did we get into, Ty? Survival
mode, yeah.
Oh, how Ty rates himself as a kisser.
Did we go there? I don't think we went there.
Come on, Ty.
Mother-in-laws.
Yeah.
Odd fashion trends.
There's fashion. There's a ton. It is part 2 is. Listen, you've done a fantastic job listening to part 1. Part 2 is going to flip it all.
Don't forget to check out our very kind sponsor, naturebox.com. Naturebox.com/verbal. You can get a free trial box of delicious snacks. Also, don't forget, if you're a new listener, if you're an old listener, please do help us out by going to itunes.com/solidverbal and giving us a review, giving us a star rating, perhaps telling your friends about the Solid Verbal. Every subscription helps us out. Every play, every comment on the SoundCloud player, which you can find at solidverbal.com, they all help us out. It's a long off season. We're one of the only college football shows that's going to be here all off season doing this. Yeah, I mean, doing this week in and week out. We put a lot of time and energy into this, so if you can help us out, it's all we ask in return for all of the goofiness we are producing here on a weekly basis, Daniel. We will be in Austin for South by Southwest. If you'll be there too, let us know, solidverbal@gmail.com. We're also on Facebook on FanCred. And on Twitter, Mr. Rubenstein, let's let the fine people go and join back up on Sunday.
I loved being in your ears, everybody.
For that guy over there, Mr. Dan, the man Rubenstein, in beautiful New York City. For myself, Ty Hildebrand here in the metropolis of Eastern Pennsylvania. Thanks again for tuning into the show. Catch y'all in a few days. Stay solid.
Peace.